Hi, and welcome to College Credit Coach. At College Credit Coach, we're striving to help kids of any age earn college credits before ever taking a college course. And I'm back with Joshua today, who just graduated high school in May of 2025 and now just graduated college in December of 2025. So 7 months later, he graduated college. And we did a video just recently on all the different CLEPs and DSSTs he did in 7th grade through 10th grade. To earn college credits, and then in 11th and 12th did dual enrollment at our local university, and then graduated after taking 3 classes on his own, that we paid for after dual enrollment, and then graduated in December. And I know a lot of homeschoolers would have a lot of questions about how the transition went from going from homeschooling to college, and maybe the adjustments that had to be made, adjustments for like studying and some different things. So I want to just take a few minutes and ask Joshua a couple different questions. He doesn't really know the questions that I'm going to ask him, and see what he has to say about his experiences and the adjustments and things that he had to do. So I know number one, I realize at least one of the things that you had to adjust to the most was time management. And I would say, what would you say about your time management?
Yeah, coming from a homeschool background, time management wasn't as important. We had that flexibility that if, whatever subject we were studying wasn't going well, we could spend extra time if we needed to watch YouTube videos, get a book from the library, whatever it took. And that was beneficial, I felt. I loved that freedom to have the time I needed to understand what I was studying, or maybe even if that was a fascinating subject, to dive deeper on it. Mm-hmm. In college, obviously, you kind of lose that freedom. For some people, that would be a lot easier than me. Time management was then, is still now, probably one of my biggest weaknesses. So learning that transition from the homeschool time management scheme to the regular school, university time management scheme was probably more difficult for me than it would be for most people. For people coming out of, regular public high school or even Christian school, I think that would be a very small transition, because even though I've never been in either of those high school settings, I think that would probably run quite similar to a college structure.
Right. So you used to like to just study as long as you could, as much as you needed to understand the subject. But then once you got to college, you really had to kind of streamline your learning, so that you could accomplish it in the timelines that you had to have.
To be even more specific, I don't remember any tests off the top of my head, but I know that there were times, I think there were times we did it for me. I know there have been times for some of us kids, I can't remember which kids and which tests between me and my siblings, where we've pushed tests back because, hey, practice exams haven't gone well, one extra week to study, so instead of taking it this Friday, we're going to take it next Friday or whatever like that. Whereas, when an exam 1 in, chemistry is on Friday, it's on Friday. And if you're behind in studying, you're just going to, your grade's going to go down.
So as far as doing multiple classes at a time in college, was that harder to adjust to than like our typical homeschool class, or our typical homeschool schedule was always like an hour and a half of math, and then a subject before lunch and a subject after lunch. So that's 3 subjects total. But when you went to biology in college, you had maybe 4 to even 6 classes at a time. Was that hard to multitask and to manage?
Yeah, I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think there were times where or at least I know the other siblings have only done one CLEP or DSST subject, which isn't necessarily bad. The time can work out kind of the same when you think about it. But as far as transitioning from that arrangement that we had in homeschool over to college, I think that took a little bit of getting used to, especially that first semester. I wasn't the best at necessarily splitting up my time. I remember doing things like spending too much time on the physics. Right. Now chemistry kind of went out the window this week, which wasn't good. But I would say even through that semester, I adapted to that one pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And then after that first semester, I feel like that was really a minimal problem to no problem at all. And I know it's very related to the time management thing, which was a bigger issue.
Sure.
But that aspect of the time management splitting, I feel like I caught on to that pretty fast and wasn't that big of an issue in the end. I think I enjoyed the diversity too.
Okay.
Maybe today my brain just can't do physics, as smart or dumb as that sounds, so I'll do chemistry instead.
Sure.
And that I think I enjoyed having a little bit of
Flexibility and difference.
yeah, that diversity.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, and one thing I remember doing with you when we were kind of adjusting to the first semester of college classes was taking a great big desk calendar and writing down the dates of your tests and the dates that things were due, and kind of working backwards at times for when you had to have readings done, when you had to have quizzes done, just so that you would stay up to, getting all your schoolwork done, so that when the quizzes and the tests came or the deadlines for the projects, you had met those expectations. And so it was a little bit of planning out more day to day what you had to do. Within homeschooling, it just kind of kept going, straightforward through.
Very, very basic stuff, obviously, stuff that I'm going to guess just about everyone working a normal job does.
Right.
But for me, with time management as kind of a character struggle, one of my bigger weaknesses, and then with the background of homeschooling, that was part of how we tried to address that, and I do think that helped.
Okay. And then obviously in homeschooling, I remember you were much more of a self-starter, self-studier. What I mean by that is I gave him the textbook, told him kind of where he needed to be each week, and you would read and do the videos and, do all that. So there was not a lot of, I'll say, lecturing, standing up and lecturing. So what my question really is was it an adjustment to start doing note-taking? And did you do note-taking? Because Josh is also somebody who loves to read, but he doesn't highlight anything in his notebook. He doesn't like to write in his notebooks or his textbooks. And then tell us about your note-taking.
I will, and more so in college. My studying did change a little bit, and you kind of mentioned it. A little bit of lecture, depending on what we did in the subject. Sometimes there'd be like lecture videos. For chemistry, for example, I had lecture videos as part of the curriculum. Note-taking, I probably would call that a big transition. The big helper there perhaps was that notes wasn't really super helpful for me for like learning. Mm-hmm. For some reason, just the way God wired me, just listening to the lecture, I get just about the same out as with taking notes. I still honestly am a pretty terrible note taker.
And he doesn't like to write, like he hates writing.
I've slow handwriting. It gets pretty
Which is fine.
messy
that's
sometimes.
Yeah.
It would honestly be something I'd love to improve, and I probably should take the time to do it in the near future because it's not going to get easier.
Yeah.
But the note-taking thing, so for individuals who really do rely a lot on notes from lectures, you can't pause a real lecture. I could pause the chemistry video. You can't do that in a real lecture.
Right.
So being good at note-taking would be important for someone who relied on it a lot more. I do different things depending on the class. So like with some classes, I just took bad notes. For physics, I just took few notes. Like I usually would end up with like a half a page of equations. And, I know there are other students there who went maybe through 2 or 3 pages of notes in a class. And that's just not what I did because A, I struggled to keep up, but B, that just wasn't how I was learning from the lecture. For me, I couldn't necessarily remember the equation, but if I had the equation, I could remember how to use it, especially if I just put in the notes like, F stands for force.
Right.
Then boom, I had it.
And I remember you taking some picture, like you could just take a picture of the whiteboard too and the notes and you would have a recording that way.
Yep, sometimes I would do that. I would say students who did like digital notes on an iPad would probably do that even more because they can somehow put that together.
Yep.
I'm sure that's relatively basic even though I never did it.
Yep. Now, one of the things I remember hearing, I think from my older sister, because she had some kids that went to college before Joshua, but was to make sure and connect with the professors, learn their office hours and where they're located, and if you had questions to go in and talk to them. And I think you found that to be very helpful, did you not? Tell me what your first physics teacher, remember that postcard that your first physics teacher gave you and that activity he had you do?
Depending on the class, I found different things to be more or less helpful. For physics, the professor had us like write a little card just to kind of get us started, and then he had us bring it up to his office. He was like, write a fun fact, your name, whatever. But in that physics class in particular, I found a lot of office hour time to be helpful. And this changed by class. There were some classes where the professor was great, the textbook was great, I did great, but I don't think I spent any time in office hours. So not only would it change with who the student is and how you learn, it would change with what the class is and what the professor is. Some professors are honestly just not that good, no matter whether it's in a lecture setting or like a tutoring section or setting, and you're better off to just watch YouTube videos or read the book or something.
Sure.
So that's got a lot of variables that influence it. But depending on the situation, the professor could be a great resource possibly in a one-on-one setting like office hours.
Okay. And then one thing we found, one of the teachers noticed that you were struggling with focus and concentration during a test because there was a huge auditorium. And your first test, you should tell us about your first test in
This was
organismal biology.
Yeah. So that first semester, the first exam I took in person was in a class called organismal biology. And at least, especially that first section of stuff was relatively basic biology information, probably compared to another biology course you would take. And it was a large class. I'm going to say there was probably 115 students or so, and we were all sitting in this auditorium. And I tell it as a funny story. I felt, and I don't think this was the case, but I felt as though everyone was communicating in like a Morse code of coughs and sneezes and snuffles that I just didn't understand. You know, like cough, cough, it's A, it's B, you know, whatever hypothetical language, coded language you could make up. But it was just quite distracting for me. And so even though that class was a whole other story and it was the worst experience I had at college, I found out that MSUM, and I suspect a lot of universities do, have, they called it the accommodation center. So I could just go there and take my test in a quiet room where there wasn't constant coughing and sneezing or whatever other sounds those students were making. And
you
eventually,
could just focus better then.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And with other subjects, smaller classes, and as I got better, like the last semester with biochemistry, I took all my exams with the class.
Yeah.
But it was quiet. No one coughed and sneezed.
Right. Okay, and I know that one big question a lot of homeschoolers would have, or people that look at homeschooling, is was it hard to adjust socially to college, going from homeschool to college? Was it hard to make friends? Was it hard to communicate with people? Was it hard to relate to people? I don't think you had a problem with that, but what was your opinion? What was your thought? You were in it.
Yeah, that's gonna vary a lot. You know, you could have two homeschool students, two homeschool families, and I think very different outcomes. Mm-hmm. You know, some homeschool kids are rather isolated, and you know, depending on how much their family talks to each other, there's so many variables that go into that. I feel like that could be, it's hard to, being that there's so many variables going in, it's very hard to give a definite answer. Personally, I didn't feel like that was that big of a thing.
Okay.
I was there primarily just for class. You know, I was very academically focused. I wasn't really looking for a college experience. I know a lot of people are, and I think I would have, if I would have pursued that, I would have had it.
Yep.
But that just wasn't interest of mine. But I don't really feel like I had an issue with that. And as time went, I feel like I got more friends, which I guess would be natural. But I became a little more interested, or a little bit better socially with connecting with others. But I really didn't feel that was a big issue.
Yep. And I think that's natural, whether you're homeschool or you come from a public school. I think as the time goes, as the semester goes, you get more friends and you talk to more people and things. So,
Yep.
So it wasn't really an issue for you. One last thing that we kind of learned, or at least at our college, was that the professors were not really interested in your parents have any kind of input or say or asking any kind of questions to any professors. So we learned that it was kind of Josh, they kind of looked at it as Josh was in college now, he's his own man, and which I get.
And
but
this,
what do you think?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yep.
And it's a part of a much longer story. So I mentioned the organismal biology class. That was, in some ways, an academic disaster. It was the only B I got in college. Everything else was an A. And I don't want to brag. A lot of work went into that. A lot of work, not just on mine, but also on your guys' end, I know. And we talked a little bit about some of those things earlier. That was really the only time I think you guys got involved at all. And it was a bad situation that wasn't being dealt with well. So
Dealt with well from the administration?
Dealt with, yes.
Yeah.
Dealt with well from the teacher and the administration side, the university side.
Yep.
So I would want to be careful with making a big generalization from that one specific poorly handled instance within, it was a real situation. So not necessarily something, I wouldn't say that that's not true, but I would be careful about making a broad
Right,
generalization.
and I'm just telling you because it was a learning lesson on our end that sometimes you just aren't welcome. I guess I don't know what else to say, but anyway, any other thoughts that you had that you feel like were learning lessons that you learned from going as a homeschooler to college, or anything that would benefit anyone who's considering, going to college now after homeschool?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's experiences are going to be different. This is just my experiences with college, and if you do the same thing I did, you might have, quite different experiences based on any number of variables. I will say a couple things that, I wish I'd have known or going in, or that I'd want other people to know is, you don't know what you don't know. And coming from that homeschool environment, which I have no regrets about, I loved it. If I have kids, I think homeschooling them is probably what I would do. But there were things that were a big jump, and you guys did a great job of walking through that process with me. So even though I was largely on my own when it came to studying and stuff like that, you guys were a tremendous help. And so I guess as much to students, this is advice to parents as much as it is to students, is to really to stick with your child through that process. If they're like me, they're still going to need you. And hopefully that lessens. I know I still depend on you guys probably more than I should, but less than when I started. Yep. So that's one thing. Sometimes you aren't going to know, and it's going to be kind of embarrassing. I remember, a couple moments stand out, and I don't think, thankfully, that it was public embarrassment, but I realized, my word, like, everyone knows this. I can tell it's obvious, but I don't know this. I remember grading systems.
Oh.
The first week of that first semester, I caught on to that pretty quick, but I wasn't as basic as that is, and as, totally second nature as it is to me now, and even in the second semester.
Right.
The first week, that took me a little bit of getting used to, which is really so dumb. So if you have a moment where it's like, oh, that is so dumb, just roll with it. There and know that stuff like that is, going to happen. Like I mentioned earlier, I got all A's, but I didn't understand a grading system the first week of the first semester.
Or you didn't know when you graduated from college either.
Yes, I didn't know which day commencement was. So,
yeah,
focus on what matters. Ultimately, be secure in who you are, kind of outside of that.
Yep.
That's, I know, a little bit deeper. But that would just be my encouragement, is to know that there were some things, I had some dumb moments, things I should have known. And you guys helped me with some of that I just had to learn. And I'm not sure, honestly, that anyone would have known about those dumb moments. So don't let it get to you necessarily too much. If I could have made a way bigger deal about that, in hindsight, not that big a deal. No one probably knew. Another thing is, looking back, I think very few people, honestly, knew who I was or what I was doing. There were a couple situations, primarily because I had a little bit of time getting books from the bookstore. People found out I was a PSEO student, or teachers primarily. But other than that, most of my teachers thought I was a normal student. Like virtually all of my classmates, if not all of them, thought I was a normal student. I even had a little bit of fun with my annoying habit of keeping my age a secret, as annoying as it sometimes was. So we
told Joshua not to tell anybody how old he was, because we didn't want it to become an issue for any reason.
Yeah, and we never did have an issue with it. It just felt like a precaution for us to take.
Right.
Honestly, for those who would be concerned about getting a college experience, I remember when we were first planning this, we were talking to someone, they asked me, they said, are you concerned about missing out on the college experience? And my response was, not really. I'm not super excited about having a college experience. I primarily think of college as, something to complete from an academic standpoint. But had I been interested in a college experience, as I think many students are, I really feel like doing PSEO would not have compromised that. You can do PSEO and still have a college experience if you want.
Great. All right. Well, we would love to hear from you down in the comments below. Let us know, if your kids are considering college, or they have gone to college, or if you've got some experiences you would like to share with us. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.